for success? How do we focus on what matters most? And most importantly, how do we make sure that our goals actually get onto our calendar? How do we make sure that they're actually on there? And so when we look at this, we have this kind of fundamental question, and that is this. And I'm going to ask you guys to come off mute a little bit to talk, if that's okay. You don't have to have your cameras on. The fundamental question is, what does an average agent's day look like in their business? And what does an average new agent's day look like in their business? So talk to me for a moment. What do you think that that looks like for an average agent or an average new agent? And by the way, by average, I mean the best of the worst and the worst of the best. So of course, no one wants to ever be average, of course. Leslie, you look like you have a thought.
I'm average.
You're not average. You are definitely not average.
My day starts with getting up early and looking at Facebook.
That's okay.
And then I come to the office and I check my emails, and then I start calling people, and then I'm supposed to be following up with people, and that may or may not happen. But as we are right now moving into our MAO, it's been completely disrupted. Everything's disrupted.
Yep, life happens, of course. All right. Well, so you do a better job than most agents when they're new in the business, because I'll be honest with you, when I was brand new in the business, I would kind of roll into the office about 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. I'd probably have a cup of coffee. I'd kind of talk to some people at the water cooler, probably make a call or two to return an ad call or a sign call or some kind of an inquiry. Then usually I would go on agent tour, and that was 2 hours a day of driving around and eating donuts and looking at 3 or 4 houses and kind of hobnobbing with other people. Then I come back to the office, and then of course I've got like lunch coma hangover. So then I'm, moving a little bit slow. And again, I'd kind of do a few things, and I'd make a few phone calls, and I'd get to the end of my day and I'd be like, whew, what a day. And yet when I looked back, I was like, wow, did I really accomplish anything? Now I'm going to tell you, of course, I started when I was 20, turning 21 in the real estate industry. And I was talking on one of those agent tours with a top producer. And I said, man, I'm having a hard time making a go of this thing. And I'm having a hard time making a go of this thing. And he said, well, how is your prospecting coming? And I looked back at him, and this is kind of funny to think back, but I looked at him and I said, well, how did you know that's what I'm working on? And he just started laughing, and he said, Brian, you're going to be doing that every single day for the rest of your life if this is the industry you're going to be in. Now, that was an aha for me, because I thought prospecting was something that I did in small chunks, that then like the business would come and I would have to then go back and do more of it. I didn't realize that it was a daily thing that I needed to be focused on. So that was my aha. So let's talk about, why does time blocking matter? And the reality is that to achieve success, people need a system and they need a tool. So they need a method of doing something, and they need the time to do it that allows them to protect their time and systematically plan their most productive activities first. It's about getting purposeful about what you need to accomplish to reach your goals. Because the reality is we all have the same number of hours in our day. And I remember Mark Willis asking the question, he said, what's the difference in someone that earns $80,000? Well, he said, what's the difference in someone that earns $8,000 a year and $80,000 a year? And it was the way they think, the way they manage themselves in time. Well, what's the difference in someone that earns $80,000 and $800,000? Because we all have the same number of hours in the day. We all have to sleep. We all have to bathe. We all have families. We all have those other things. And the answer to that is, it's about how we spend our time. It's about our thoughts, our actions, our habits, and our rituals. And so this is where time blocking really allows us to start to get very purposeful and very intentional about maximizing the potential that we have in our time. So I always ask this question when I'm working with agents, or I'm in a coaching conversation, and I ask this: if I looked at your calendar, would I know your goals based on what's on your calendar? Yeah, I see Leslie. She's like, ooh, I don't know. Yeah. So the reality is that if you think about it this way, time blocking is just going to be a process of committing your goals to your calendar and then, of course, following your calendar. And when I was a team leader, I learned this at a really high level. And a team leader's expectation was that we would do 2 appointments a day, 10 a week, 40 a month. We call that the 2-10-40. And based on that, we would typically hire 1 hire for every 4 appointments we went on. So that's like a listing agent. It's like going on 4 appointments and you get 1, which actually is really bad odds as a listing agent. You'd probably go on 4 and you get 3. But it's the same concept. So every day as a team leader, I had 2 standing appointments on my calendar that I was looking to fill. And we're going to talk a little bit about that system. But every day I woke up looking at that calendar going, I have to have 2 appointments today. If you're an agent and you need 3 a week, it's the same concept. So let's talk about how we do this. This is the challenge. And this is directly from the book, The One Thing. So if you've not read this, this is a fantastic book on understanding some of these core principles, and time blocking is one of those. But the challenge is that for most agents on a typical day, they spend like this. They spend a little bit of time, just a little bit of time on the thing that's the most important, and then they dedicate the vast majority of their time to everything else. Now, if this resonates with you, I apologize because I've had this conversation with myself, and sometimes you have to go back and rehab the conversation again. A productive day is really spending a significant amount of time on the thing that matters the most, on your one thing, and then having everything else also kind of fit into the cracks of your calendar. And I think one of the challenges with success is that the deeper that you go in the one thing Gary talks about, when you're in your one thing, it's like you're going deep in a submarine. And of course, in our world today, this has a little different meaning than at the time that he wrote this. But that submarine has, like, the deeper that you go, the submarine has more and more pressure being exerted on the outside. And we as humans, when we feel that pressure, we have the tendency to want to like go back to the surface and open the hatch and deal with all the stuff. The reality that is that magic happens when you're down deep and that pressure is going, and you feel like all those would do's and could do's and ought to do's are going to like hang you with a noose. The reality is that's when the magic happens. You have to learn to stay there and recognize that some of those things don't matter. Some of those things will clean themselves up. Some of those things are just other people's priorities. But at the end of the day, this is about your priority. And that can be an uncomfortable feeling, but you have to get a little bit comfortable with it. So let's just talk a little bit about what time blocking is specifically. It's dedicating specific periods or blocks of time to specific purposes. So it's really assigning your calendar, time on your calendar, a specific outcome that you're looking to achieve. And it's focusing on your big rocks first, okay? So let me just see real quick if I can share this video with you. Let's see here. Okay, advanced. There we go. Okay. It's not going to let me, so I apologize for that. So I'm going to post this in the chat for you guys so that you can go take a look at this. This is, hold on, let's see. Can you guys hear that? You can't, can you? Okay, cool. I will post this in the chat. This is Gary Keller talking about this fictitious race that we run in life, and that as we run in life, we are carrying like a rock. We're carrying a block, a rock, a one thing. When the world figures out that we're good at carrying rocks, they start throwing more rocks at us. And the key is that we as humans, because we want to please people and we want to take care of people, we just start like carrying all these rocks. And in the video, it's Gary against this other guy that's running this race to get to their goal, their someday goal. And Gary just keeps having the one rock. He's just running with the one rock. The other guy, he's got so many rocks, he's got to get a bag, and he starts dragging the bag of rocks. And that's how we become as people. We start to like drag around these priorities that we've accumulated. And it's a challenge. The reality is it's a challenge. So let me go back in the screen share here. Let's see. There we go. Great. Okay. On the current slide. There we go. So when we're focused on time blocking, it does a couple of very specific things. It ensures that we're spending our time on the most productive activities first thing. In other words, we don't let other people's fires become our emergencies. It gives purpose to every day. And I will tell you, when it comes to time blocking, if you're like me, there are a lot of things that we could do and should do. And just there's all these priorities the world puts on us. But when we really look at that time blocking, we get clear on how we need to spend our time. For me, at least, it gives me almost peace and calm that I don't have to do it all. I just have to focus on what matters most. Time blocking helps to protect your 20% activities to make sure that they actually get done. And it helps you to make sure that you're systematically building your pipeline. And like I said, so that you're not lead generating, servicing business, having this up and this down in your business that happens if we don't lead generate consistently. Now, President Eisenhower gave us this concept of his time management tool. Now, again, time management is a misnomer. We don't manage time. I can't take 24 hours and turn it into 36. I can only manage myself in time. So this is really a self-management tool. But many of you have heard this or seen this before, and typically things that come at us fall into one of four quadrants. The first is important and urgent. These are what I call the things that we put our fire hat on and we run around putting out fires all day. These are crises, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects, meetings, preparations, things that we just have to, like, they have to get done. They're critical, but usually they're not necessarily the things that move us towards our biggest goal. Then we have, in that same important quadrant, we have the non-urgent. These are the things that are not the fires beating our beating our door down. They're not the things that are the squeaky wheel, but the magic happens in this box. And if you think about it this way, the important non-urgent is preparation, prevention, values clarification, planning, relationships, empowerment. This is being purposeful on working on your business, not in your business. And if you think about this in terms of your health, if you don't take care of yourself, you don't go out and work out, you don't get your cardio rate up, you don't do those things, your health may not be urgent until you have a heart attack or you get sick or you become diabetic or something else. And all of a sudden, those things that were not urgent will show up and become urgent. On an agent schedule, if we don't do the prospecting, the lead generation activity, those things that we need to do, we put all the other fires out and we do everything else first. All of a sudden, the urgency of our bank account will show up and we'll start to go, holy cow, I don't have closings. Like, what's going on? I need to go get back into that activity. And then, of course, at the bottom, we have the non-important. The quadrant 3, the non-important urgent is the quadrant of distraction. These are interruptions. These are a lot of phone calls that we get. Some pressing matters that just are not really that important. Emails, reports, meetings that maybe are those tier 2 things that just aren't the things that really drive our success. We have to show up to. And these can really be things that hijack our time. The fourth one is the non-important, non-urgent. And this is where TikTok lives. This is where Leslie said she likes to check Facebook in the morning. And you know what? It's okay to have a little bit of, it's no different than watching the news or anything else. And we just don't want that to become, like our entire day of scrolling. So the quadrant of waste is trivia, busy work, junk emails, frankly, some phone calls, and just time wasters, those things that just are not moving us forward and they're not contributing to our life. So that's the quadrant we want to try and eliminate. So that's the Eisenhower matrix. The challenge is that without time blocking our time, we're always moving our most important activities around other urgent activities, which means we're running around with our fire hat on, putting out fires. Meanwhile, the things that really, really matter, they're just not getting done. So let's talk about this. The cool part about time blocking is it really helps you reach any goal. And I want you to understand that this isn't just in your professional life. It can be in your financial life, it can be in your personal life. It can be with your family. A great book on time blocking for your family is called the Family Board Meeting. The Family Board Meeting, and it talks about how you set time aside for your family and create special moments for especially your children, but your spouse also. It's a great book on how you do that in your family. But for today, we're talking about our real estate career and our real estate life. So there's really 5 distinct steps that we have to go through in committing to time blocking and ensuring that we have success in this space. The first one is, of course, one of the 6 personal perspectives. It's committing to move from E to P. That's not E to P, that's entrepreneurial to purposeful. Then it's committing to the 80-20 principle, making sure that we really understand what are the big rocks in our business that make the biggest impact. Once we've committed to the E to P and we're focused on our 20%, now it's time to actually go do the work of scheduling our blocks. Once we schedule our blocks, we talk about we have to stick to it. And as Diana taught us, if you erase it, you must replace it. So if you have to move something when life happens, and it does happen, we should have to go find another place on the calendar for it. And lastly, we have the bold law: if it's not in your schedule, it doesn't exist. And I will be very candid. I have probably, I don't know, probably 12 to 1,400 things on my stack of to-do list stuff, things that are could do, should do's, ought to do's, might do's, would do's. Some of them are just do-do's. But those live in my task list. If I don't go put those on my calendar, they do not get done. And I know that about myself, just my natural work style. But the reality is if I haven't dedicated time to it, it just doesn't get done. So that's where if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist. It's actually very true. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about E to P. Many of you have seen this before. E is doing what comes naturally. When I was a new agent, I didn't wake up in the morning and go, I should probably have like 20 minutes of spiritual time, and then I should probably go work out for 30 minutes, and then I should probably laugh and hug my family, and man, I should probably be to the office by 8 o'clock so I can do a stand up and plan my day. And then I should probably make sure that by 9 o'clock I'm lead generating, and I really should lead generate from 9 to 11. And boy, I think I should really put my lead conversion and follow up 11 to 12 after my lead generation so that has a specific time. And man, I tell you, I should really make sure that I block my 2 appointments a day that I need to go on. And I really ought to keep those like the same time of the day just to make sure that, I can create consistency in my schedule. I didn't wake up and realize that. I had to learn that over time. I showed up at 10:30 and left at like 4:30 and couldn't figure out why I couldn't get above a certain level of sales. I was the challenge. So E is that doing what comes naturally. It's using your drive, your enthusiasm, your intuition, your natural behavior, and your spontaneity. And the challenge is that our natural behavior will take us so far. Now, in some cases, we have high ceilings of achievement. In my case, I could sell about 50 to 55 homes a year by myself. And like I would have that same year every year. But that was that ceiling of achievement I was bumping up against. When you hit that ceiling of achievement, the challenge is you start to have disappointment settle in. You have a little bit of resignation. Like, I thought this was going to be more fun. I thought this was going to be a better outcome. We see this all the time in the real estate industry. People then start to move to greener pastures. They're like, this real estate thing might not be for me, but maybe I should go be a lender or a home inspector or something else. And all of a sudden they go to the next space and they have that same challenge. Well, purposeful comes from doing what comes unnatural. This is about systems. This is about models. It's about training. It's about having focus and looking at your strategic options. It's about accountability, getting real about our situation. And when we, oops, I needed to admit someone there. There we go. When we get purposeful, all of a sudden we break through that ceiling of achievement and we go to a much higher level. And that allows us to achieve more. Now, the issue with breaking through your ceiling of achievement is you will hit another ceiling. So for most agents that are a level 1 MREA team, which means they're one solo practitioner, on average, they can do about 30 units a year. When you hire your first admin, you can go from about 30 to about 60. When you hire your second admin, you can go from somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to about 90. And by the time you get to 90, you're ready to hire your first buyer's agent or showing specialist, and that can typically take you to 120 units. That's about being purposeful. That's about understanding the models and using the models to leverage you. And that's going from E to P. So this is the first step. The second step in time blocking is understanding Pareto's principle. And Pareto was an Italian economist, and he looked around and he started to realize that there was this law of disproportionality, as he called it. He realized that at the time, 20% of the population owned 80% of the land. And as he started to study science and other areas, he found this law just came up time and time again. And while it wasn't always exactly 80-20, sometimes it was 90-10, sometimes it was 85-15. The result of that was that there was typically a few that resulted on the biggest outcome. And in real estate, there were no different. There are 192 distinct tasks that a real estate agent has to be good at in order to be able to do their job, in order to be able to say, I'm a great agent. And if you ever want to look those up, those are on the Keller Inc. Relic Publishing, kellerinc.com. You can go there and there's a download of the MREA items, and there is job function by role and task, and that will list all 192 items. But the reality is, of those 192, there's actually 9 activities that generate 80% of an agent's outcome, just 9. So when you have a lot to be good at, there's 9 that if you master those, you will be phenomenal, and actually you'll be able to hire people to do all the other things that you want. So let's look at what those 9 activities look like. The first one, shocking, is lead generation. And I used to have a video of Gary talking about this. They took it down on KW Connect when they transitioned, and I have not been able to find it again. But Gary makes the point that one of the reasons that we have to focus on lead generation so consistently is we always need new leads. But the second reason is because part of the magic or the secret sauce of lead gen is becoming top of mind awareness with our customers, but also being in front of them at just the right time. So even though over a 7-year period of time, we may reach out to them multiple times, that they're reminded of us, they're interacting with us, we're talking about home ownership or home related issues, there's going to be a point in time where the wife or the husband looks at each other and goes, honey, I think it's time we start looking for a house. What do you think? And the reality is that if we're not picking the phone up or interacting with them that day or the next day or somewhere very close to that moment, we may have an opportunity to lose that transaction forever. And so that's part of the reason why that consistency of lead gen matters. So enough leads and the right timing. So we know we need to be lead generating. And I think on this, the one thing that I would say is there are a lot of lead gen levers out there. Do what you love, do what you enjoy. Many people associate lead gen with just what I said, calling. We have an agent in another office that all of her lead generation is nonprofit boards that she serves with. And I think she's on 8 or 9 nonprofits. She's everywhere in the community. And because she's everywhere, she has high visibility and people just naturally know that she's a real estate agent. That's her lead generation. We have agents that love to lead generate by spending time at the golf course and at the club. It's kind of like kids with broccoli. You have to eat enough of the lead gen activity to really know, do you like it or do you not like it? And at the end of the day, you've got to like 3 or 4 of them. One of those should be your database, but you don't have to do things that you don't like. So if calling expireds isn't your thing and you prefer door knocking or circle prospecting, great, do that. So don't lead gen shame yourself is the message. Once we lead generate, we've generated this flow of leads. We do have to block time for our lead follow-up and our lead conversion. So Wayne, you're in my screen. You've got a pipeline of people that have raised their hand to say, hey, I'm kind of going to do something sometime, right? You can shake your head, yeah. So again, that lead conversion, lead follow-up, we've generated the lead. Now we have to nurture and maintain that relationship. This is where the lead follow-up comes into play. For most people, you'll need 1 to 2 hours of lead generation for every 1 hour of lead follow-up. As your pipeline gets bigger, you're probably going to need 2 to 3 hours of lead generation for every 1 hour of lead follow-up. So that's why we recommend 9 to 11 and then 11 to 12 as a very typical schedule for your lead generation and your lead follow-up. Then 20% activities is going on listing appointments, the actual art of sitting down with a seller at their kitchen table and having a conversation, or nowadays sometimes on Zoom. So it's listing appointments, then it's buyer appointments. We put in that order because listings are the high leverage gift of the real estate gods. That's right out of the MREA. So we want to make sure that we have our priorities first and we're working high leverage opportunities first. So we have our listing appointments, our buyer appointments. Then it's about negotiating contracts. And this really is actually one of your top 9 activities that moves your business forward. And of course, becoming skillful at how you negotiate and how you handle the challenges, that is where you enhance your skills in this area. And a great book on that is the book, Never Split the Difference. Number 6, it's price reductions. I do laugh about, this would have been about 2021. We had an agent that had been in the business about 9 or 10 months. And she came to me and she said, hey, someone told me you need to take a price reduction. What does that mean? And I kind of laughed. I said, well, it means you reduce the price. She's like, oh, is that a thing? And that my aha was that we had been in such a good market that we hadn't talked about price reductions for so long that there are agents that really didn't know that was a thing. And that was an interesting insight to me. When I was practicing in the 2008 through 2010 timeframe, we would typically take our first 5 price reductions at the listing table. So we would sign the contract. We would say at this date, it's going to go to this price. This date, it's going to go to this price. This date, it's going to go to this price.
You want to hear this? You want me to take it off my earbuds?
Leslie, we can hear you actually. You're good. So it is price reductions. And then lastly, it's market research. It's understanding your market and what is happening in that market. And I think part and parcel with service your customers really well, this is a personal belief, is being able to, like when you have a listing, set up auto prospectors that will show you, here are the new listings that are in our territory that we're competing with, and here are the things that went pending. That way you're able to inform them, hey, this week there were 9 new listings that went under contract that are in the box of properties that like somebody would look at us and they would look at them. And of those, 2 went under contract, which means probably inventory is growing. If you have 9 coming on the market and 7 or 8 are selling, well, okay, why did we not sell? And that's market research, and that helps you facilitate getting those transactions closed faster and with less friction. Okay, so those are your 20% activities. There's 2 more that I'm going to add to this. One is adding to your center of influence, so adding to your database, so growing that database, feeding it daily. And then lastly, it's working on your business. And this is something I think too few people in our industry give credence to, and it's really being able to block time to do your business planning. It's blocking time to be able to review your goals. And we're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So those are the 9 activities that lead to 80% of your results. And really, if you think about that, these are the triggers, these are the leading indicators that drive income in our business. So these are the things that we want to make sure that we're purposefully putting onto our calendars when we're talking about time blocking. Now let's go into a couple of other things. We talked about your 20% activities. These are your big rocks. You'll hear us talk about that. That's a Kellerism. Those are the things that matter more than anything else. And these are these 20% activities I just showed you. That creates focus and it creates results for you. Now let's talk about some 80% activities. These are things that still sometimes have to get done, but they're not the most critical. I know it sounds odd answering the phone now. When a prospect calls, answering the phone actually matters. When it's the title company, when it's the inspector, when it's these other things, if you're in your 20%, you might let that go to voicemail and you can follow up. That way you're not leading your life by other people's priorities, or their 911 emergencies aren't becoming your pressing emergency. Processing listings, which you can give that to a TC, creating flyers, voicemails, processing and closing, like the paperwork, following up with a lender, preparing a file for a listing appointment, setting up showing appointments, website work, data entry, researching expired FSBOs, fixing your computer, not the best use of our time, fixing the printer. Had to do that yesterday, so life happens. We all succumb to these things at times. I'm laughing. This says faxing and photocopying and scanning. Faxing. I think I need to update this presentation. Really, anything that's not in your 20%, emails, web research, MLS, blah blah blah. These are things that still do have to get done at some point. You don't want to put these in your blocks that matter the most. And frankly, this is what a lot of people spend a lot of their time on. So let's talk about how do we put some of this into action. You guys have seen this. This is the example that I use of an economic model for Mr. John B. Wealthy, who has a desire to earn $150,000 of income and needs to close 6.8 million in 14 transactions. If you do not already have your economic model, see your team leader, and we will make sure that you have that. This is your clarity tool that walks you through all the numbers of your business. The most important thing, in my opinion, is what do you want to earn, which is at the top. And then lastly, it's how many appointments do we need to go on? And in this case, Mr. John needs to go on 2.38 appointments a week, which is either 2 appointments one week and 3 the next, or I just round up because I'd rather overshoot than undershoot. And I say that's 3 appointments because it's oftentimes hard to meet with half a seller. It gets awkward. That was a joke. You can smile. So 3 appointments a week. If 3 appointments a week drives everything that needs to happen, then the number one thing Mr. John needs to be thinking about every single day is do I have my 3 appointments scheduled? And if I don't, what do I have to do today such that by doing it would help me schedule 3 appointments? So knowing your number of appointments needed is really one of the keys, because that's the leading activity that drives all of the results. Now, this is an example of a heavily time blocked calendar. This is great in theory, and I see Leslie's eyes like bugging out. And yes, this is a great theoretical calendar, but we'll talk about some of the challenges with this. But this is the calendar of a solo or solo plus an admin agent that's doing 52 units a year, so 1 unit a month, that has everything blocked in such a way that they're able to take Saturdays completely off, and the only thing that they would do on Sundays is negotiate an offer. And yes, it's true, if you do the right things in your work week, you actually can go take time off on the weekend. I know that sounds odd sometimes. And so it starts with starting your day with exercise. So putting on your calendar, when is your fitness time? 20 to 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week is all it needs. Leslie will send out these slides, absolutely. Then we have our dress and our prep time. Dress is just getting ready. Prep is that preparing for the day. What's on the calendar? What did we forget about because we went to bed and took a nap last night? What needs to happen? Then we start our lead gen session with some script practice. The brain cannot distinguish between real play and role play, and it's a brain trick. So when you read a script and you have a positive outcome, with, if I'm just, role playing with Wayne and he gives me a couple of objections and he gives me the appointment, my brain actually gives me a little hit of dopamine as if I had set an actual appointment. And so that script practice kind of preconditions or preloads your nervous system for the activities that you're about to partake in. Because without that, that first phone call, I don't know about you, but that receiver, I'm dating myself, that receiver can feel like it weighs 100 pounds to lift it up and make the phone call. But once you make the first one, the second time, it's like, oh, that's easy. Let's go. Okay. Then we have 9 to 11, we have lead generation. 11 to 12, we have our lead conversion, lead follow-up. Here we have 12 to 1. We've got a healthy lunch, some little bit of time to recharge. Now, if you're like me, lunch is a protein shake in my hand in front of my computer for like 5 minutes, but having some time in there is sometimes good. I'd rather get home earlier and not spend an hour at lunch. In this case, this example has a team meeting at 1 o'clock. We typically have those at 11. So you just kind of have to know to move that around. You've got 2 training classes. On Mondays, you're going to update all your buyer files. And on Fridays, you're going to update your seller files, which, by the way, this is exactly how I ran my business. Told every buyer I talked to you on Mondays, and I told every seller I'd talk to you on Fridays. That way they know when to expect my call. 2 to 3, you're making some follow-up phone calls, emails. Scheduling your appointments at the time that it's convenient for you is really critical. And so being able to say to a seller, I really look forward to getting together with you. I have 2 times available on my schedule right now. I've got a time at 3 o'clock or a time at 5 o'clock. Which one works the best for you? Well, I don't get off work till 5. Okay, I understand that. Then let's do 5. Well, I need it to be at 7. Okay, and this is the script. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I appreciate that you need to, you need to get home and probably put the kids to bed and have dinner and what have you. And the reality is I'm the same way. And because I work very hard for my clients, my day starts very early. So I'm sure there's days where you probably take a little time off to go to the dentist or to go do something during the day. Well, this time might be like that. It may be that important for us to get together. So is there a way that we could possibly get together at 3 o'clock? That way, by the time 5 o'clock's done, you'd be able to go right into your family time and we'd be done with our appointments. And it's shocking the number of times that you say that to a customer and they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. When 10 minutes earlier, they wanted you to be halfway across town, 2 hours after it was time for you to be at home with your family, okay? So it's just about the scripts. We have our second appointment and then we have our 7 o'clock, our family time. Now, the challenge with this, I'm sure that you guys can see, is this is like perfection. This is a robot that doesn't really exist because life happens in here. You're going to get to one of these spots and you're going to have a low energy moment, or your willpower is depleted, or the school calls and your kid's sick. Like, these things happen. And so part of time blocking is, again, remembering that it's about progress, not perfection. And that's really important because I think a lot of people start to time block, and when they're not perfect at it, they go, well, this doesn't work. Well, it just didn't work for that day. So if you fall off the horse, cool. Let's start the next day, start it over, okay? Now, of course, we talked about when life happens, if you erase, you must replace. So if you do have the school calls and the kids are sick or whatever happens, we then have to go back in our planning and our prep time, and we need to reallocate time somewhere else in the week for those activities. And one of the challenges that I see with agents is, especially when they do their 411, is that they will, let's say they need 8 appointments a month. And so week 1 comes by, they don't get their 2 appointments done. Week 2 comes by, they get 1 appointment done. Rather than week 2, them saying, hey, I didn't do my 2 last week, so now I need 4 this week. They go, well, I still need 2. Well, now all of a sudden you're 3 or 4 appointments behind and you're in week 4, and now there's no way to fix that or catch it up. So one of the things, and I know that Heather coaches with Leslie, one of the things that Heather oftentimes talks about is preload your month. So if you need 8 appointments a month, span those 8 appointments over your first 3 weeks, because then if something happens in one of those weeks, you've got a 4th week to be able to catch up. I think that that's a great tip and a great little hack to try to make sure that those things happen on schedule. Because the reality is, if you hit your appointments, you will hit your goal. That is a proven fact. Okay. So let's talk about how do we actually make this happen. First of all, I'm a big fan of Google Calendar, just to be able to go in and set up your blocks. On my calendar as OP, and on my calendar when I was a team leader, and truthfully when I was in production also, anything that was money making was in green. Anything that was non-money making was in a salmon color. So it kind of stood out when I was in my dollar productive time and when I wasn't. So go to your calendar and set up what are those ideal schedules for your lead gen. And even if you start with 1 hour a day and maybe 30 minutes of lead follow-up, then when are you going to book your appointments? When are you going to study the market? And just go book a little bit of those on there. You can expand them over time, but if they're not in your calendar, they probably don't exist. However many appointments you need, book them at the same time every day. Are they always going to be the same time? No, you may have to move them. But it's a lot easier to say when a customer wants to meet at 9 o'clock in the morning when it's your lead gen time, you go, hey, I apologize. I already have an appointment scheduled at that time, but I do have an appointment at 3 or 5 available. Which one works better for you? Now, the reality is your appointment is with yourself to do something that's really important, and that's okay. That's a legitimate appointment. Know your numbers to know how many appointments are needed each week to stay on track. And I said this, commit to this for 66 to 90 days. And then the one thing, there was a very famous study where they asked people to switch which hand they brushed their teeth with. And it took as little as 17 days and as many as 263 days. That was the range, 17 to 263 days before someone started brushing their teeth and felt natural brushing their teeth with their other hand. The average of that survey was 66 days. So we know that's why you'll hear Keller Williams talk about a 66-day challenge, because statistically, if you do something and you follow it for 66 days, now not doing it feels uncomfortable. And as I said, if someone interferes, just remind them you have an appointment and it happens to be with yourself. So here's a couple of just keys to successful time blocking. There's a great book. I have it over here on my shelf. It's John Maxwell, How Successful People Think. It's a very, very short read and it's very insightful. He talks a lot about this in that book. So you have to plan to plan. So set a 1 hour time block weekly to review your annual and monthly and weekly goals. So this is working on your business, not in your business. Let's see, I have a typo in there, so I'll fix that. Okay. Then it's be thoughtful about what goes onto your calendar. And you really want to take a look at your 411. And your 411 is, what is your 1 year goal? That's broken down into monthly and then weekly blocks. So what needs to happen at the end of the year, then each month, what needs to happen this month, such that I'm on track for my yearly goal. And then your weekly is what needs to happen this week, such that by the end of this month, I'm on track, such that by the end of the year, I'm on track. And your 411 is really a have-to list. It's the things that have to get done. So look at your 411 and ask, or just look at your annual goals and ask, what needs to happen this month to be on track with your annual goals? And then we have to ask the question based on that, what needs to happen this week to be on track for a monthly goal? And in the one thing Gary talks about, just taking that to the extreme, what's the one thing I should focus on today such that by focusing on it, it'll put me on track for my weekly, my monthly, my yearly goal? Then what's the one thing I should focus on like this hour, such that it would put me on track for that and create a domino run? What's the one thing I should focus on in the next 15 minutes? And Gary calls that the focusing question, and there is great power in that. And the other thing that I will say is as your world gets more complex and there's more to-dos and would-dos and ought-to-dos and might-dos, that 411 in this goal setting tool. It gives me a lot of peace. And I find a lot of other people say the same thing. When you realize you don't have to do it all, you just have to do what matters. Okay. Another key to success, or the third key to success, is ensure your 20% activities are on your schedule. So block time early in the day. And I'm going to talk about early in the day here in a moment, but block time early in the day and big chunks of it. Gary talks about that at KWRI, he gets in early, about 7 a.m., and he's very purposeful between 8 and noon. And by noon, everyone thinks that he's such a structured guy and all this. He admits that at noon, he may start wandering around to other departments and ask, hey guys, how you doing? What's going on? And he goes, I will be like the biggest distraction because I've already had my purposeful day. And he goes, if you haven't had your purposeful day, the world will show up and do the same to you. So block it early, block big chunks. Again, if you erase, you must replace. Time block a little bit of thinking time each week or each month, separate from your goal setting. And I call this the white margin space, the time that you just need to sit down and go, all right, where am I at? What's real? What am I working towards? How does this align with my mission? And that's time that is almost spiritual in nature, but it just makes sure that everything aligns with what you're doing. And the reason I see this is you can be a high achiever that's just doing and doing and doing. And all of a sudden you wake up and you realize you have a big old handful of doo-doo. And this is kind of that check to make sure, hey, all systems are go. I'm in alignment with my values. I'm in alignment with my family. I'm in alignment with my health. And if not, let's make a course correction. Okay. And I said, use a focusing question to realign your important priorities and stick to it. So, don't go, hey, I've got an hour, I'm going to hop on TikTok and scroll. We talked about this. What's the one thing I should focus on this month, such that it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And remembering that time blocking is for your personal life also. And in fact, Gary says, we're actually working on planning our 2025 year right now. So we're working on this exact process. But Gary says the very first thing that you should block in your year is your vacation. It's your time off. Block your play time first and then block your pay time second. Because if you don't block your vacations, they'll never happen, especially in this industry. We know that. Block time for your exercise, your kids' events. I said if you've got kids, the family board meeting is a great book to talk about that. Now, as I said earlier, that time block example that was like perfection, it did not have any white space. Now, that was a very intentional schedule of taking the weekends off. But you do need to have some white space or some buffer time. You want to have a little bit of time between things to run to the restroom and to deal with those, hey, you got a minute, that reality says do come up. So don't overblock yourself such that you set yourself up for failure. Review and reflect. Block time on Fridays. I call this planning and posting. Block time on Fridays to review how did the week go and what percentage of the week did you honor your blocks? And for those of you who want an alternate to the 411, there's a very, very similar process that Gary has actually endorsed. It's called the 12-week year. And the 12-week year is very similar to the 411, but rather than having to be perfect on everything, you give yourself a rating each week of like, hey, I was 80% or I was 70%. And that 12-week year model says if you got 80% of what you set out to do done, you had a good week. So you have permission to fail a little bit in that. So look at what was your weekly score. How many of your time blocks did you honor? What was your weekly score? And again, I said this earlier, and I'm going to say this over and over and over again. It's progress over perfection. When a toddler starts to walk, and we've got a granddaughter that started walking a few months back, and she's wobbly and she's teetering, and as the parents and the grandparents, we're not saying like, kid, like just put one foot in the other and just go, like you need to get this right. We're going, you got this, you're almost, oh, look at that, you fell, all right, hop up, okay. We're cheering them on because it's about progress, not perfection. Be careful of your self-talk, because sometimes you tell yourself that you have to be perfect and you don't. It's 1% better every day is a 37x multiple by the end of the year. So just focus on being a little bit better today than you were yesterday, and you'll wake up one day and you'll be in places you couldn't even believe. Okay, so that's the review and reflect. The last one, this is a touchy topic, but I put it in here because I happen to be one of these people that this matters for. You do have to know your energy clock. And if you just kind of think about not from a perspective of being lazy or, what time would you like to get out of bed, but when are you at your best? Now, I'm at my best when it comes to reading and thinking at like 7 or 8 a.m. I'm very good at that. I am not at my best for client presentations, trainings, meetings, one-on-ones, any of that until about 10 or 11 in the morning. That's just when my energy level finally turns on. And my highest point of the day, the time that I'm the crystal clearest, the time that I do my very, very, very best work is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Drives my wife crazy because then, 3 o'clock I'm at a high and I want to go to like 7 o'clock because those are my peak working hours. So you do have to assess your energy clock and figure out when are you most productive. And the vast majority of people are productive in the morning. So for most people, they'll say 8 o'clock, I'm at my best. But surveys show that 5 a.m. to noon is about 63% of the population. 17% are at their best noon to 5, like that's their high. You do have 20% of your people that are at their best in the evenings. Interestingly, when I'm writing content, when I'm writing presentations, I'm absolutely my best like 7, 8 o'clock at night. All the distractions of the day are gone. So when I'm time blocking, my time blocks may look a little bit different than someone else. But the problem with that is this, that by 12 o'clock, a lot of fires can come up, a lot of distractions can happen. And so that structural tension that you have to have if you're a later in the day, energetically up person, you have to have even better self-control, because it would be really easy to go, "Ooh, it's 3 o'clock. I just want to like knock out of here today." Nope, I still have my one thing to do. So recognize your energy clock. So let's talk about just some to-dos from here. How do you use this? First of all, I'll send out this presentation so that you have it. I'm going to encourage you to go back to your economic model and relook at how many appointments did you need each week to be on track for your goal. And then make sure that you go back and you block your lead generation time, block those appointments that are needed. And I call these the planned appointments. So if you say I do my appointments at 4 and 6, just go block those in. The reality is then when someone says, when are you available? You go, well, I'm available at 4 on Tuesday or 6 on Thursday. They go, well, I can't do it until 5. Okay, we'll move that one to 5, no big deal. It just becomes a placeholder for you to be able to set your schedule up to when. So block your appointments, block your planning time, your end of week review, your beginning of the week, forward planning, and then your monthly just alignment conversation with yourself. And then go stick to it. Give yourself 66 days. We're at the new year. This is a good time to set New Year's resolutions, even though I don't really like that concept of a New Year's resolution because they usually go away. But go set a 66-day challenge. Pull out a calendar and set a goal that in 2025, you're going to honor 80% of your time blocks over 66 days. And every time you check that off, and I was going to see if I could just pull that out, the photo of it here. Every time you check that off, just go ahead and put that check mark on the calendar. That calendar is in the book, The One Thing, and celebrate your success. So we went through your 20%. We went through E to P. We went through the 80-20 principle, and we talked about some strategies. So I'd like to just come off the screen share here and ask you, what did you hear that was impactful or meaningful? What ahas did you have? And how do you envision yourself being able to use this to go lead your best business and your best life possible? Love to hear from 2 or 3 of you, if you don't mind. And Wayne, you're in my eye shot, so I'm going to call you out first.
Sure. Thank you. Great presentation. I think it's to your point, making sure that the 20% is prioritized in time blocking and making sure that that time is protected on a daily basis, because that's really what's the magic to the sauce.
Yeah, because we all have the same number of hours in the day, and what separates those that achieve more from those that don't, and it's this conversation. Cool. Leslie, you look like you're going to come off mute.
Yeah. There we go. Having a week review. We
good.
have not had a week review. And then I've changed my calendar as we've been going along here, different color blocking a little bit more, but we've been very consistent about putting in the time. If you looked at our calendar, you would know that we expected to do, well, 10 listing appointments a week, which we really only need 5, but I blocked 2 of them out so we can at least get 1 a day.
I love that. That's awesome. And by the way, success leaves clues. How many units are you projected to close this year?
How many units are we going to close? 90? Right around 90.
90
this year.
Yeah.
86.
Okay.
Faith says.
We're going to round that to about 100. About 100. So 10 listing appointments a week. You're doing 100 units. Congratulations. That's success.
Well, it's 5, but we're blocking for 10 just to make sure
so you're double blocking. I got it. Okay,
we're double blocking, so we make sure that we at least get half of those.
Great. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Let's see. We've got Haley. We've got Tisha, Jerome. Any other ahas or nuggets that were takeaways for you? All right. Well, if not, I appreciate your time today. I'll make sure that you guys get these slides so that you have access to them. I'll make sure that I capture who was on the call. And I encourage you, go sit down and do a little bit of planning during the holiday. This is a really great time to spend time with your family. It's a really great time to have that little bit of white space to plan. What does your year look like? What needs to happen in 2025 such that you're always on track? And then next year, it's just about following your calendar. It's not about selling real estate. It's about following your calendar. So I appreciate you guys. If you have questions, reach out to me. And if I don't see you between now and then, have a happy holiday and happy new year. And we will see you in one of the future sessions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.